Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive building in front of him. The Galactic Defense Academy stretched high into the purple sky of Centauri Prime. Its walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to change color in the light. Jake had never seen anything like it back on Earth. He picked up his single bag and walked toward the entrance. Other students were arriving too, but they looked nothing like Jake. Some had forearms, others had skin that looked like rock. A few seemed to glow with their own light. Jake felt very small and very human among them. A tall creature with blue skin and extra eyes walked past Jake. It looked down at him and made a sound that might have been laughing. Jake tried to smile, but the creature just walked away. Inside the academy, Jake found himself in a huge room filled with hundreds of alien students. A voice boomed over a speaker system, telling all new students to report to the main hall. Jake followed the crowd, trying not to bump into anyone with sharp edges or spikes. The main hall was even bigger than the entrance. At the front stood a creature that Jake knew must be Commander Thale. The commander was twice as tall as Jake and covered in what looked like natural armor. Scars ran across his face and arms, showing he had been in many battles. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," Commander Thale said in a deep voice. "You are here because your species believes you have what it takes to become elite warriors. Most of you are wrong." Jake felt his stomach drop. He looked around at the other students. They all seemed so confident, so strong, so ready for whatever came next. "The galaxy faces many threats," the commander continued. "Pirates, rebels, and worse things that live in the dark spaces between stars. Only the best graduates from this academy will join the elite guard. Only the strongest will protect our worlds." A student near Jake raised one of her forearms. She was tall and thin with gray skin. "Commander, what about the human? Why is he here?" Jake felt every eye in the room turn to look at him. His face turned red, and he wanted to disappear. Commander Thale looked directly at Jake. "The human is here because Earth requested to join the Galactic Alliance. Part of that agreement was sending an exchange student to our academy. Whether he belongs here remains to be seen." After the speech, Jake was given a room number and told to find his quarters. The hallways of the academy were confusing, with signs written in languages Jake could not read. He got lost 3 times before finding his room. His roommate was already there. The alien had forearms, green skin, and was much taller than Jake. He was putting his belongings away in neat piles. "You must be the human," the alien said without looking at Jake. "I am Vex. I am Skellen. Nice to meet you," Jake said. "I'm Jake Morrison." Vex finally looked at him. "Your sleeping area is over there. Try not to make too much noise. Skellens need proper rest to maintain our strength." Jake unpacked his few things quickly. Everything he owned fit in one small corner of the room. Vex had enough equipment and weapons to supply a small army. The next morning, Jake's first class was basic combat theory. The instructor was a creature called a Negsari. She had pale skin and large, dark eyes. Her name was Professor Kane. Combat in space is different from combat on planets. She began. "You must think in 3 dimensions. You must move fast. You must be smart. She looked around the room and her eyes stopped on Jake. "Human, what advantages does your species have in combat?" Jake thought for a moment. Back on Earth, humans were considered pretty good fighters. But compared to these aliens, he was not sure. "We learn quickly," Jake said, making it sound like a question. Several students laughed. One of them, a Nexari with silver hair, spoke up. "Professor Kane, humans have no natural armor, no psychic abilities, and no special strength. What can they possibly offer?" Professor Kane nodded. "That is a fair question, Zara. Perhaps we will find out during training." The first training exercise was a simple obstacle course. Jake watched as other students completed it easily. The Krillians smashed through barriers with their armored bodies. The Vorthans walked through solid walls like they were made of air. The Nexarus moved together like they could read each other's minds. When Jake's turn came, he had to climb over barriers that others walked through. He had to find ways around obstacles that others simply destroyed. By the time he finished, everyone else had been done for 10 minutes. 43 minutes, announced Sergeant Core, a Vorthen instructor with gray skin and cold eyes. "The Academy record is for minutes and 12 seconds. More laughter filled the training room. Jake felt his face turn red again. The next exercise was weapons training. Each species had weapons designed for their natural abilities. The Skellans used energy staffs that required for hands to operate properly. The Krillians wielded massive war hammers that would crush a human. The Nexarus had weapons that responded to thought. Jake was given a basic energy pistol, the kind used by security guards. It felt strange in his hands. Nothing like the rifles he had trained with in the human military. Human weapons are not permitted. In training, Captain Yarix explained. He was another Krillian, smaller than Commander Thale, but still intimidating. "You must learn to use proper military equipment." During target practice, Jake missed more shots than he hit. The energy pistol had a different weight and balance than anything he was used to. Other students hit their targets easily, some without even seeming to aim. "Maybe the human should try a job that does not require fighting," Vex said quietly to another Skellan. "Perhaps food service or data entry." Jake pretended not to hear, but the words hurt. Lunch was held in a huge cafeteria. Jake sat alone at a table, eating food that tasted like nothing he had ever experienced. Round him, groups of students from the same species sat together, talking and laughing. Zara Quinn, the silver-haired Nexari who had questioned his presence in class, walked over to Jake's table. She did not sit down. "I want you to know that I do not think this is personal," she said. "But the elite guard is for the best warriors in the galaxy. Lives depend on the skills we learn here. Your presence suggests that political agreements matter more than ability." "I understand," Jake said. "I will try to prove I belong here." Zara shook her head. "You cannot change what you are. Humans are weak. You have no special abilities. You will never be elite guard material." She walked away, leaving Jake alone with his strange-tasting food. That evening, Jake called his family back on Earth using the Academy's communication system. His sister Amy appeared on the screen, smiling. "How is alien military school?" she asked. "Challenging," Jake said. He did not want to worry her by telling her how badly things were going. "I know you will do great," Amy said. "You always figure things out." After the call ended, Jake lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling outside his window. The alien stars looked cold and distant. He wondered if coming to the academy had been a mistake. Maybe Zara was right. Maybe he really did not belong here. But Jake had not come this far to give up after one day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he would face them the only way he knew how, like a human. 3 months had passed since Jake arrived at the academy, and things had not gotten much better. His scores in physical training were still the lowest in his class. He could not lift as much as a Krillian, move as fast as a Vorthan or coordinate with others like a Nexari. But Jake had started to notice things that others seemed to miss. During combat simulations, most students followed the same patterns their species had used for thousands of years. Krillians always charged straight ahead. Vorthans tried to sneak around enemies. Nexarus worked in perfect groups. Jake could not do any of these things well, so he had to try different approaches. Sometimes these worked. Most times it did not. Morrison. Sergeant Corps called during morning training. "You will lead today's exercise." Jake felt all eyes turn to him. Leading exercises was usually given to top students like Zara or the best Krillian fighters. "The scenario is simple," Sergeant Corps continued. "Your squad is trapped behind enemy lines. You must reach the extraction point without being detected. You have 30 minutes. Jake looked at his squad. There was Vex, his Skellen roommate, a quiet Vorthan named Dex, two Nexarus who always worked together named Lin and Max, and a young Krillian called Brock who was almost as big as Commander Fail. "What is the plan?" "Human," Brock asked. His voice made it clear he did not expect much. Jake studied the training area. It was designed to look like a destroyed city. There were broken buildings, piles of rubble, and automated defenses that would shoot at anyone they detected. Most squads tried to sneak through using Vorthan abilities, or smash through with Krillian strength. Jake had watched these approaches fail many times. "We are going to walk straight down the main road," Jake said. His squad stared at him. Vex made a sound that might have been choking. "That is suicide," Lin said. "The automated guns will destroy us." "Not if they think we are supposed to be there," Jake replied. "Dex, can you phase through that damaged wall over there and get to the control room?" Dex nodded. His Vorthan abilities let him walk through solid objects. "Good. When you get there, change the settings on the defense system. Make it think we are friendly forces returning from patrol." "That is cheating," Max protested. "No," Jake said. "That is thinking. Real enemies would use any advantage they could find. Why should we not do the same?" The plan worked. Dex reached the control room without being seen. The defense system was confused by the changes he made. Jake's squad walked calmly down the main road while the automated guns ignored them completely. They reached the extraction point with 15 minutes to spare. No other squad had ever completed the exercise that quickly. Sergeant Corps was not pleased. This was not the intended solution, Morrison. "But it worked," Jake said. "In a real battle, would the enemy care if we used the intended solution?" The instructor had no answer for that. Word of Jake's unusual success spread quickly through the academy. Some students were curious about his methods. Others thought he was just lucky. Luck does not work twice, Zara told him after combat class. Your tricks will not help when you face real opponents. Jake was about to answer when alarms began blaring throughout the academy. All students were ordered to report to the main hall immediately. Commander Thale stood at the front of the room, but he looked different. His usual confident expression was replaced by something Jake had never seen before: worry. Students, the commander began. I have received reports from the outer systems. We are facing a new threat. Ships have been attacking our colonies, but they do not match any known enemy forces. A hologram appeared above the commander, showing grainy footage from a battle. Jake could see Alliance ships firing at what looked like clouds of small, fast-moving objects. These attacks follow no known patterns, Commander Thale continued. The enemy uses thousands of small ships instead of large battleships. They do not seem to care about their own losses. Our traditional tactics have proven ineffective. Jake watched the footage carefully. The Alliance ships were trying to maintain formation while being swarmed by countless tiny attackers. It reminded him of something from Earth's history, but he could not quite remember what. All senior students will be assigned to active duty positions. The commander announced, "You will help defend our worlds while continuing your training." After the assembly, Jake found himself assigned to monitoring duty at a communications station. It was basically a desk job, watching for enemy signals and keeping track of fleet movements. Around him, other students received combat assignments. Zara was put in command of a Nexari fighter squadron. Vex would lead a Skellen boarding team. Even some of the younger students got positions on actual warships. Jake spent his days listening to radio chatter from the front lines. The news was not good. Every battle report told the same story. Alliance forces would engage the enemy using standard tactics, only to be overwhelmed by swarms of small attack craft. The enemy had been identified as something called the hegemony. They came from the outer rim of the galaxy, where few civilized species lived. Intelligence reports said they were controlled by a hive mind that could coordinate millions of ships at once. They fight like insects. Jake heard one pilot report after a failed battle. No individual intelligence, but perfect coordination. When one ship moves, they all move together. Jake thought about this while he worked. Perfect coordination meant perfect predictability. If you could figure out the pattern, you might be able to break it. But the Alliance military leaders were not interested in new ideas. They kept trying the same tactics that had worked against other enemies. Large ships in formation, each species using their traditional strengths. One day, while monitoring communications, Jake heard something that made him pay attention. A transport ship carrying civilians was under attack near the mining colony of New Brisbane. The ship's captain was calling for help, but all military forces were engaged elsewhere. "This is Transport 77 Alpha." The captain's voice crackled over the radio. "We have 300 civilians on board, including children. Enemy fighters are closing in. We need immediate assistance." Jake looked around the communication center. The other students were busy with their own duties. The supervising officer was in a meeting. No one else seemed to be listening to the distress call. Jake made a decision that would have gotten him in serious trouble if anyone had noticed. He activated the emergency broadcast system and sent a message to any Alliance ships in the area. All units, this is Academy Control. Transport 77 Alpha is under attack at coordinates 7-7-Mark-4. 300. Civilians in danger. Any ship able to assist, please respond. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then a voice Jake did not recognize came over the radio. Academy Control. This is Captain Sarah Blake of the Earth Defense Ship Liberty. We are responding to the distress call. Jake felt his heart jump. Captain Blake was human, and her ship was one of the few Earth vessels in the area. Liberty. B. Advised that enemy forces are using swarm tactics. Jake transmitted. Traditional formation fighting has proven ineffective. Understood. Academy Control. We will adapt accordingly. Jake listened as the rescue played out over the radio. Captain Blake did not try to maintain formation or follow standard Alliance tactics. Instead, her ship moved in unpredictable patterns, using asteroids and debris as cover. The human crew seemed to treat the battle more like a game than a formal military engagement. It worked. The Liberty drove off the attacking swarm and escorted the transport to safety. Academy Control. This is Captain Blake. Came the voice over the radio after the battle. Thank you for the tactical advice. Your suggestion about avoiding formation tactics was correct. These enemies require a different approach. Jake felt proud, but he also felt frustrated. He was stuck at a monitoring station while real battles were being fought across the galaxy. His unusual way of thinking might be useful, but no one would give him a chance to prove it. That evening, Vex returned to their room from his first combat mission. The skeleton looked tired and shaken. How did it go? Jake asked. Badly, Vex replied. We tried to board an enemy command ship, but their smaller craft overwhelmed our assault shuttles. Half my team did not make it back. Vex sat heavily on his bed. These enemies do not fight like anything we have faced before. They do not fear death. They do not make individual decisions. It is like fighting a storm instead of an army. Jake nodded. What if that is exactly what they are? What do you mean? You said they fight like a storm. Storms are powerful, but they follow patterns. Wind patterns, pressure patterns. If you understand the patterns, you can predict where the storm will go next. Vex looked at Jake with new interest. You think the enemy has patterns we can learn? Everything has patterns, Jake said. Even chaos has rules. The question is whether anyone is looking for them outside their window. The stars looked the same as always, but Jake knew that somewhere out there, battles were being fought and lost because no one was willing to try new approaches. The galaxy needed someone who could think differently, someone who could see patterns that others missed, someone who was not bound by thousands of years of military tradition. The galaxy needed someone who could fight like a human. Jake was in the middle of monitoring routine communications when every alarm in the academy began screaming at once. Red lights flashed throughout the building. and automated voices announced a general emergency. Students ran through the hallways, some heading to emergency stations while others simply tried to find out what was happening. Jake stayed at his communication post, listening as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. "This is Outpost Meridian. We are under massive attack. Enemy forces number in the millions. Repeat, millions of small craft approaching our position. Defense. Fleet 7 requesting immediate reinforcement. We cannot hold our position. The enemy swarms are too large. Colony ship Peaceful Dawn is under attack. 3,000 civilians on board. We need help now." The reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Jake realized this was not just another raid. This was a full invasion. Commander Thale's voice boomed over the Academy's communication system. "All students report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. The hegemony has launched a coordinated attack across 17 systems." Jake found himself reassigned to the Academy's main command center, where he could monitor communications from the entire battlefield. Huge screens showed the positions of Alliance fleets and the spreading red marks. That represented enemy forces. The situation was worse than anyone had imagined. The hegemony had not just sent raiding parties. They had committed their entire military force to this attack. Millions of small fighters, supported by larger command ships, were sweeping through Alliance space like a plague. Jake watched in horror as fleet after fleet reported the same story. Traditional Alliance tactics were completely useless against the enemy swarms. Ships that tried to maintain formation were overwhelmed and destroyed. Fighters that engaged in individual combat were outnumbered 100 to 1. Nexari Squadron 7 has been destroyed, reported a communications officer. No survivors. Jake felt sick. Zaraquin had been commanding Nexari Squadron 7. Skellen Assault Team 3 is missing in action. Came another report. Their boarding ship was overwhelmed during approach. That was Vex's unit. Jake's roommate was missing, probably dead. On the main display, Jake could see the pattern of the invasion. The hegemony forces moved like a single organism, flowing around strong points and concentrating on weak areas. Every time Alliance forces tried to respond, the enemy had already moved on to the next target. Admiral Cruz, the Academy's senior commander, stood at the center of the command room directing the defense. She was human, one of the few Earth officers. "In the Alliance military, we need to concentrate our remaining forces," she announced. "All ships will fall back to defensive positions around the core worlds." "Admiral," interrupted Captain Kane, a Nexari officer, "concentrated formations will make us easier targets for their swarm attacks." "Then what do you suggest?" Admiral Cruz asked. "Our current tactics are clearly not working." Jake watched the argument develop between the senior officers. Each species wanted to use their own traditional methods. The Krillians wanted to charge straight at the enemy. The Vorfans suggested stealth attacks. The Nexarus proposed coordinated strikes using their telepathic abilities. But Jake had seen all of these approaches fail already. The enemy adapted to every strategy the Alliance tried. They learned from each battle and adjusted their tactics accordingly. "Excuse me," Jake said, stepping forward from his monitoring station. Every officer in the room turned to look at him. Jake realized he had just interrupted a conversation between some of the most senior military leaders in the galaxy. "You are the human exchange student," Admiral Cruz said. "Morrison, correct." "Yes, ma'am. I have been monitoring all the battle reports, and I think I see a pattern in the enemy behavior." Captain Kane made an annoyed sound. "Admiral, we do not have time for student theories." "Let him speak," Admiral Cruz said. "At this point, we need all the ideas we can get." Jake walked to the main display and pointed at the enemy movements. "Look at how they respond to our attacks. When we use formation tactics, they swarm us. When we try individual combat, they overwhelm us with numbers. When we use stealth, they detect us anyway." "Yes," said Commander Thale. "That is exactly the problem. But what if that is also the solution?" Jake continued. "They are adapting to our standard tactics because our tactics are predictable. Every species in the Alliance has been fighting the same way for thousands of years." Jake highlighted several battles on the display. "Here, here, and here. Every time we deviate from standard procedures, we achieve better results. The few successful engagements we have had were when commanders ignored their training and tried something new." Admiral Cruz studied the display carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "Stop fighting like an alliance," Jake said. "The hegemony expects U.S. to use Krillian heavy assault tactics, Nexari coordination, and Vorthan stealth. They have prepared for all of these approaches." "Then how should we fight?" asked Captain Kane. Jake took a deep breath. "Like humans." The room fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances that clearly said they thought Jake had lost his mind. "Human military tactics are primitive," Commander Thale said. "Your species has no experience with large-scale space warfare. That is exactly why it might work." Jake replied, "The enemy has never faced human tactics because humans have never been part of galactic warfare. They cannot adapt to something they have never encountered." Admiral Cruz was still studying the display. "Explain what you mean by fighting like humans." Jake thought about every war movie, every history book, every military story he had ever heard on Earth. Humans fight dirty. We use whatever weapons we can find. We change tactics constantly. We take risks that other species would consider insane. And most importantly, we never give up. That sounds like chaos, not strategy." Captain Kane objected. "Exactly," Jake said. "Controlled chaos. The enemy's hive mind is designed to handle predictable opponents. It learns patterns and develops counters. But what if there are no patterns to learn?" Before anyone could respond, another alarm sounded. A communications officer called out, "Admiral, long-range sensors detect a massive enemy force approaching. Zentari Prime. Estimated arrival in 6 hours." The command room erupted in activity. Officers began issuing orders for the planet's defense. But Jake could see from the numbers that it was hopeless. The approaching enemy force was larger than anything the Alliance had faced before. "All available ships will form a defensive line around the planet," Admiral Cruz ordered. "Admiral, wait," Jake said. "That is exactly what they expect us to do. Let me show you something different." Jake moved to a smaller display and began entering data. What if we do not form a defensive line at all? What if we scatter our forces and attack from multiple directions at random intervals? That would be suicide, Commander Thale said. Without coordination, our ships would be picked off one by one. Not if we move fast enough, Jake replied. Hit and run attacks, strike and disappear, never stay in one place long enough for them to concentrate their forces. Admiral Cruz watched as Jake demonstrated his idea on a tactical display. This would require perfect timing and communication. No, it would require the opposite. Jake said each ship commander would have to make independent decisions based on local conditions. No central coordination, no predictable patterns. That goes against everything we know about military strategy. Captain Kane protested. Everything we know about military strategy has failed against this enemy, Jake pointed out. Admiral Cruz was quiet for a long moment, studying the approaching enemy formation. Finally, she spoke. Morrison, you said you want to fight like humans. Are there any human ships in this system? Yes, ma'am. The Earth Defense ship Liberty is currently docked at Station 7. For repairs, contact Captain Blake immediately. Tell her to prepare for combat operations. Admiral Cruz turned to address the entire command room. We are going to try the human approach. All ships will operate independently using hit-and-run tactics. No formations. No central coordination. Commander Thale looked shocked. Admiral, you cannot be serious. This goes against all military doctrine. Our military doctrine has cost us half the fleet in 3 days. Admiral Cruz replied, if we continue fighting the same way, we will lose everything. At least this gives us a chance. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and terror. His ideas were about to be tested in the most important battle of his life. If he was wrong, the Academy and everyone in it would be destroyed. But if he was right, maybe the galaxy could finally start winning this war. Outside the command center windows, Jake could see ships beginning to move into new positions. Instead of forming neat battle lines, they spread out across the system in seemingly random patterns. For the first time since the invasion began, the Alliance was not fighting like the Alliance. They were fighting like humans. The enemy would arrive in 5 hours. Jake would soon find out if chaos could defeat order, and if unpredictability could overcome perfect coordination. The biggest test of his life was about to begin. The hegemony fleet arrived exactly when predicted. Jake watched from the command center as thousands of enemy contacts appeared on the sensors. The swarm was so large, it looked like a dark cloud spreading across space. Enemy forces number approximately 50,000 small craft with supporting command vessels, reported a sensor officer. They are beginning to form attack patterns. Jake studied the enemy formation on the main display. The hegemony ships moved with perfect precision, arranging themselves into geometric patterns that would allow maximum firepower concentration. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. All Alliance ships. This is Admiral Cruz. Came the voice over the communication system. Remember, no formations, no predictable patterns. Hit hard, move fast, disappear. Fight like your lives. Depend on it, because they do. The first human ship to engage was Captain Blake's Liberty. Instead of approaching the enemy formation directly, she took her ship on a wide curve around the system's asteroid belt. Jake watched as she used the floating rocks for cover, appearing suddenly to fire at enemy stragglers before vanishing again. Liberty. To all ships, Captain Blake's voice crackled over the radio. These tactics work, but you have to commit fully. Half measures will get you killed. Other Alliance ships began to follow the Liberty's example, but many of them struggled with the new approach. Krillian ships were built for direct assault, not hit-and-run attacks. Nexari vessels relied on group coordination that was impossible when operating independently. This is not working, Commander Thale said, watching several Alliance ships get overwhelmed while trying to execute human-style tactics. Our ships are not designed for this kind of combat. Jake could see the problem. The Alliance crews were trying to fight like humans while still thinking like their own species. Admiral, we need to mix human and alien crews. Let humans make the tactical decisions while aliens handle the systems they know best. Admiral Cruz nodded. All ships prepare to receive human tactical advisors. We are implementing mixed crews immediately. Jake found himself assigned to the battleship Endeavor, one of the largest ships in the defense fleet. The ship's captain was a Krillian named Torx, who looked skeptical about taking advice from a human student. I have been commanding warships for 30 years, Captain Torx said as Jake arrived on the bridge. What can you possibly teach me? How to think like prey instead of a predator, Jake replied. Your species always fights like hunters, but sometimes the best way to win is to act like you are being hunted. Captain Torx growled, but he was desperate enough to listen. Jake studied the Endeavor's capabilities. It was a powerful ship with heavy armor and massive weapons, but it was also slow and predictable. Perfect for traditional Alliance warfare, terrible for hit-and-run tactics. We cannot outrun the enemy fighters, Jake said, but we can make them come to us on our terms. Take us into that debris field at coordinates 7-7- for double quotes. That is a ship graveyard. Captain Torx protested. The wreckage will interfere with our sensors and weapons. Exactly. It will interfere with theirs too. But we know the area, and they do not. The Endeavor moved into the debris field, using the wreckage of ancient battles as cover. Jake positioned the ship behind the destroyed space station, where it was almost impossible to detect. When a group of enemy fighters entered the field, looking for Alliance ships to attack, Jake had the Endeavor wait until they were completely surrounded by debris. Then the big ship opened fire at close range, destroying dozens of enemy craft before they could react. Hit and fade, Jake called out. Move to the next position before they can coordinate a response. The tactic worked. By using the debris field like a maze, the Endeavor could appear anywhere, strike quickly, and disappear again. The enemies' numerical advantage meant nothing when they could not bring their forces to bear across the system. Other ships were learning similar lessons. Vorthen's stealth abilities worked perfectly for human-style ambush tactics. Skellen multi-limbed coordination was ideal for rapidly changing ship configurations during combat. Even Nexari telepathy became useful when used to confuse enemy sensors. Instead of coordinating friendly forces, Jake Captain Torx said during a brief pause in the fighting. Your tactics are working, but they require constant adaptation. How? Do we maintain this level of unpredictability? Jake thought about every sports game, every video game, every competition he had ever been part of back on Earth. We make it up as we go. Every attack should be different from the last one. Never. Repeat a successful tactic exactly. That sounds like madness. It is. But it is controlled madness. Madness with a purpose. The battle continued for hours, slowly. Jake began to see changes in the enemy behavior. The hegemony's perfect coordination was becoming a weakness. Their hive mind kept trying to develop counters to alliance tactics, but every time it adapted to one approach, the humans would switch to something completely different. A breakthrough came when Jake noticed something strange in the enemy movement patterns. Captain, look at grid section for 4 Alpha. Do you see how the enemy fighters are hesitating before engaging? Captain Torque studied the display. They appear to be waiting for orders. Exactly. Their hive mind is getting confused by our unpredictable tactics. It is taking longer to process decisions because it cannot find patterns to follow. Jake opened a communication channel to all Alliance ships. This is Morrison on the Endeavor. I think we are overloading their command system. Every time we change tactics, their hive mind has to recalculate. If we can change fast enough, we might be able to paralyze them completely. Admiral Cruz's voice came back immediately. All ships, implement maximum tactical variation. Change your approach every 30 seconds. Keep them guessing. The effect was dramatic. Enemy formations began to break down as individual fighters waited for instructions that took longer and longer to arrive. The hegemony's greatest strength, their perfect coordination, was becoming their greatest weakness. But Jake knew this advantage would not last forever. The enemy hive mind would eventually adapt to their chaos tactics, just as it had adapted to everything else. Captain, Jake said to Torx, we need to end this battle quickly. The longer it goes on, the more time they have to figure us out. What do you suggest? Jake looked at the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. There, in the center of the swarm, was a cluster of larger ships that had not moved during the entire battle. Those are the command vessels, Jake said. The hive mind has to be controlled from somewhere. If we can take out their command structure, the rest of the fleet should become disorganized. Impossible, Captain Torx replied. Those ships are protected by thousands of fighters. No ship could get close enough to attack them. No single ship, Jake agreed. But what if we coordinate one massive strike? Every Alliance vessel attacks the command center at exactly the same time, from different directions. That would require perfect timing and communication. The kind of coordination you said we should avoid. Jake smiled. Sometimes the best way to be unpredictable is to do exactly what the enemy least expects. They think we cannot coordinate anymore because we have been fighting independently. A sudden coordinated strike would be the last thing they anticipate. Captain Torx was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. It might work, but we would only get one chance. Jake opened communication channels to every Alliance ship in the system. All vessels. This is Morrison on the Endeavor. Prepare for coordinated strike on enemy command center. Attack commences in exactly 60 seconds. Hit them with everything you have. The next minute felt like the longest of Jake's life. He watched as Alliance ships across the system began moving toward the enemy command center from dozens of different directions. Some came from behind asteroids. Others emerged from debris fields, and a few simply charged straight through the fighter swarms. 30 seconds. Jake announced over the radio. Captain Torx had positioned the Endeavor for a direct assault run. The big ship's engines were at maximum power, ready to punch through whatever defenses the enemy could organize. 10 seconds. Jake said, his heart pounding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All ships attack now. The space around the enemy command center exploded into chaos. Dozens of Alliance vessels opened fire simultaneously, their weapons creating a web of energy beams and projectiles that overwhelmed the hegemony's defenses. The enemy fighters tried to respond, but they were confused by attacks coming from every direction at once. Their hive mind could not coordinate a defense against so many simultaneous threats. Jake watched as one enemy command ship after another was destroyed by the concentrated firepower. Each time a command vessel exploded, he could see groups of enemy fighters lose coordination and begin flying in random patterns. "It is working," Captain Torx said with amazement. "Look at Sector 7. The enemy fighters are attacking each other without the hive mind to control them. Individual enemy ships had no idea what to do. Some continued following their last orders. Others simply stopped moving, and a few began firing at anything nearby, including their own forces. All ships continued the attack. Admiral Cruz ordered, target any remaining command vessels. The battle turned into a rout, with their command structure destroyed. The hegemony forces had no ability to coordinate or adapt. Alliance ships hunted down the remaining. 6 months after the victory at Centauri Prime, Jake found himself aboard the Alliance flagship Enterprise, preparing for what everyone hoped would be the final battle of the war. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen before, with mixed crews from every species working together using the new tactical doctrine he had helped develop. The bridge was a perfect example of how much things had changed. Captain Lisa Chen, a human officer, commanded the ship while her second-in-command was Commander Thale, the same Krillian who had once doubted Jake's abilities. Nexari officers worked alongside Vorthan navigators, and Skellen engineers coordinated with human tactical specialists. Jake, Captain Chen said as he entered the bridge, "We have just received word from our scouts. The main hegemony fleet has been located." Jake moved to the tactical display where Admiral Cruz was studying a holographic star map. The enemy position was marked by a massive red cloud in a system called Nova Terminus, near the edge of known space. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "Intelligence estimates over 2 million combat vessels," Admiral Cruz replied. "This is their entire remaining force. If we can defeat them here, the war will be over." Jake felt his stomach tighten. 2 million ships was 10 times larger than any force they had faced before. Even with their new tactics, the odds seemed impossible. "What is our strength?" he asked. Every available Alliance ship has been gathered for this operation, Admiral Cruz said. We have approximately 800,000 vessels, including all the new mixed cruise ships, still outnumbered more than 2-1. But Jake had learned that numbers were not everything in this kind of warfare. Have we learned anything new about their command structure? Jake asked. Commander Thale stepped forward. Our intelligence. Teams have been studying captured hegemony technology. The enemy hive mind is controlled by something called the core mind, located on a massive ship at the center of their fleet. How massive? Jake asked. The size of a small moon. Thale replied. It is heavily defended and constantly moving within the fleet formation. Previous attempts to locate and destroy command ships worked because they were relatively small and vulnerable. This is completely different. Jake studied the tactical data, trying to understand the problem. The core mine ship was not just large. It was also protected by layers of smaller vessels arranged in perfect defensive formations. Any attack would have to fight through millions of defenders. Traditional assault would be suicide. Captain Chen observed, even with our new tactics, we cannot break through that many defenders. Then we do not try to break through them, Jake said slowly, an idea beginning to form. What if we make them come to us instead? Admiral Cruz looked interested. Explain. Jake moved to the star map and highlighted several systems near Nova Terminus. The hegemony has been using hit-and-run tactics against our colonies, while keeping their main fleet safe. What if we threaten something they cannot afford to lose? Their entire fleet is already committed to this position. Commander Thale pointed out. What could be more valuable to them? Jake thought about everything they had learned about the enemy during the war. The hegemony was not just an army. It was an entire civilization controlled by the hive mind. They needed resources, supplies, and most importantly, new systems to expand into. Their home systems, Jake said suddenly. The hegemony must have a core territory where their civilian population lives. If we threaten their homeworld, they will have to respond. Admiral Cruz was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. That would require splitting our forces. Half would have to attack their home territory while the other half engages their main fleet. Not attack, Jake corrected. Threaten. We make them think we are going to attack their homeworld, but our real target is still the core mind. When they move to defend their territory, they will break up their perfect defensive formation. Captain Chen smiled, a feint. Make them react to a threat that does not exist while preparing the real attack. Exactly, human. Military history is full of successful feints and deceptions. The enemy has adapted to our direct tactics, but they have never faced human-style misdirection. The plan that emerged was the most complex operation in galactic history. Half the Alliance fleet, led by Admiral Rodriguez on the battleship Freedom, would approach the hegemony's home systems and begin what appeared to be a full-scale invasion. Meanwhile, the other half would hide in a nearby nebula, waiting for the enemy to split their forces. Jake was assigned to Admiral Rodriguez's group, serving as tactical coordinator for the deception operation. As they approached the hegemony's core systems, he could see their plan was working. Enemy scout ships began reporting their presence, and long-range sensors detected movement in the main enemy fleet. "They are taking the bait," reported Lieutenant Dave Watson, the human communications officer. "Enemy forces are beginning to move toward their home systems." Jake watched the tactical display as the massive hegemony fleet slowly broke apart. Groups of ships peeled away from the main formation to intercept Admiral Rodriguez's force, just as predicted. But the core mine ship remained in the center of the largest group, still heavily defended. Jake realized they needed to make the threat even more convincing. "Admiral Rodriguez," Jake said over the communication system, "we need to actually attack one of their outer colonies. Make them believe we are serious about invading their territory. That will put civilian lives at risk." Admiral Rodriguez replied, "I know, but if we do not make this convincing, the entire plan fails and we lose everything anyway." The decision was made to attack a small hegemony outpost with minimal civilian population. The attack was carefully planned to cause maximum alarm while minimizing actual casualties. But it had the desired effect. Jake watched as more enemy ships broke away from the main fleet, rushing to defend their home systems. The perfect defensive formation around the core mine was finally beginning to weaken. "Admiral Cruz," Jake transmitted to the force hiding in the nebula, "the enemy formation is breaking up. You should have a clear approach to the core mine in approximately 30 minutes. Understood, Jake? Excellent work. When this is over, remind me to never play poker against you." The final phase of the battle was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Admiral Cruz's force emerged from the nebula and struck directly at the weakened core mine defenses, while Admiral Rodriguez's ships continued their deception operation. But the enemy was not completely fooled. As soon as the real attack began, the core mine recalled its scattered forces and began rebuilding its defenses. Jake realized they had a narrow window of opportunity before the hegemony could fully respond. "All ships," Jake transmitted on the open channel, "we need maximum chaos doctrine. Every ship operates independently. Maximum unpredictability. Do not let them reorganize their defenses." What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. Millions of ships engaged across multiple star systems, while Jake coordinated between the two main alliance forces. His role had evolved from tactical advisor to overall battle coordinator, making split-second decisions that affected the lives of billions. The turning point came when Captain Chen, commanding the Enterprise, managed to break through the core mine's defenses using a maneuver that Jake would later describe as completely insane, but tactically brilliant. She used the ship's engines to surf on a solar flare, approaching the massive enemy vessel from an angle that their weapons could not cover. "Enterprise to all ships," Captain Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "We have visual contact with the core mine. Beginning boarding operations." Jake watched from Admiral Rodriguez's ship as teams of Alliance Marines, led by human Sergeant Tony Parker, fought their way into the core mine vessel. The battle inside the ship was fierce, with enemy defenders using their knowledge of the ship's layout to maximum advantage. But human Marines had something the enemy did not expect: the ability to think independently even in the middle of chaos. While alien soldiers might have been overwhelmed by the ship's confusing layout, Humans treated it like an urban combat environment and adapted accordingly. Boarding team to Fleet Command, came Sergeant Parker's voice over the radio. We have reached the central core, initiating shutdown procedures now. Jake held his breath as the seconds ticked by. Around him, the bridge crew of the Freedom watched the tactical displays, waiting to see if the plan had worked. Suddenly, across the battlefield, enemy ships began to lose coordination, just as it had happened at Zentari Prime. The destruction of the hive mind's control center left individual enemy vessels confused and directionless. All enemy vessels are standing down, reported the sensor officer. They appear to be surrendering. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. The war was finally over. In the weeks that followed, Jake found himself back at the Galactic Defense Academy, but in a very different role. Instead of being the struggling exchange student, he was now an instructor teaching mixed species tactics to a new generation of officers. His first class included students from every Alliance species, including several humans who had arrived after Earth's full membership in the galactic community. They looked up at him with the same mixture of curiosity and respect that he had once reserved for his alien classmates. The most important lesson you can learn, Jake told his students, is that your